Welcome to Clash Corner, your daily dose of chaos.
I spent 35 years dealing with something nobody could explain, and the answer was hiding in my dinner. I spent 35 years dealing with something nobody could explain, and the answer turned out to be hiding in my dinner. When I was around 7, I started getting painful swelling in my neck and throat on a road trip with my cousins. Everyone assumed I was just getting sick and that some sun and time would clear it up. I remember it vividly because it was so uncomfortable I could barely eat. I dealt with it for about a week before I got back home and told my parents. They took me to the pediatrician, who poked around and told my mom I had mumps, despite being vaccinated. It eventually went away, until around 10, when it happened again. A new doctor, fresh out of school, said there was no way this was mumps and sent me for imaging and testing. Everything came back inconclusive. The new conclusion was that it was psychosomatic, and I got funneled into years of therapy and appointments about why I couldn't just let it go, why I was attention-seeking, maybe it was ADHD. The sensation never truly left. It just fluctuated in severity. Fast forward to 19, I was in the military and home on leave visiting friends and family. This had been bothering me for 12 years at that point. I rode with a buddy to a phone store. It was below freezing and his truck heater had the thermal output of a mouse breath. We grabbed hot coffee before heading back out. I took one sip and felt something in my throat and neck move, like inches. I started coughing like crazy and hacked out a tonsil stone about the size of a popcorn kernel. I had no idea what it was at the time, so I wrapped it in tissue and brought it home. My parents immediately recognized it. I was relieved and figured that had to be the end of it. It was not. Fast forward again to about 32. I had kids, a wife, a career. Managing tonsil stones mostly worked, but I still had that persistent lump in throat feeling almost all the time. I finally saw an ear, nose, and throat specialist in the city we had just moved to. He basically said, "Forget the tonsil stone routines. Let's just take your tonsils out." I was 1000% on board. No more weird mouthwashes, brushing like a crazy person, avoiding certain foods. I was ready to be done. Surgery happened. Recovery was insane. Blood, a rural emergency room, strong pain medication, and a hospital that looked like it had 10 total people in it. But hey, tonsils were gone. Except the lump feeling was still there. I assumed it was phantom pain from surgery and tried to live with it. We moved again to a bigger city and I went for what felt like my 100th opinion. More tests, more appointments. The conclusion this time was allergies. I did 3 years of allergy shots. Still felt it. At that point I was completely defeated. Everyone either thought I was nuts or drug-seeking. Even family still treated it like mental health. I gave up. Then yesterday, my youngest made taco rice for dinner. I'm sitting there eating like a pig and suddenly I bite down on something very hard, about the size of a small marble. I spit it into a napkin and it's a bone. Like an actual chunk of bone. My first thought was, how the heck does a bone like that end up in ground beef? Then it hit me. The lump feeling was gone. For the first time in 35 years, no swelling, no pain, no persistent lump sensation, no mumps, nothing. Just normal. I haven't had imaging since. I'm booking an ear, nose, and throat follow-up because this is insane. Yes, I kept it, bagged it, because nobody will believe me otherwise. I get that it could have been lodged somewhere weird, tonsillar area, throat pocket. I'm not claiming medical magic, just that this happened exactly like I described. I also get that it could be something other than bone, also why I saved it. Would you have kept looking for answers, or would you have given up too?
Ready for more? Here comes Clash number 2.
Bride demands I remove my engagement ring at her wedding. I'm supposed to attend a wedding next month, but the bride just told me I can't wear my engagement ring because the stone is too close to her wedding color. I'm meant to be attending the wedding of Tilly and Peter next month. They're friends of my fiancé, and we've hung out plenty of times over the past few years. They got engaged around 18 months ago, and we got engaged 3 months ago. My engagement ring stone is a light blue sapphire. In photographs, however, it looks a lot darker, which is relevant. We met up with Tilly and Peter last weekend, which incidentally was the first time seeing them in person since we got engaged. When they asked to see the ring, Tilly noted that it was much lighter than the photos we'd shared. Peter agreed, and a little while later, after the conversation had turned to something else, Tilly asked if we remembered that the bridesmaid's dress color was a very pale blue. My fiancé is a groomsman, so knew this, as he's wearing a matching tie. Peter said that they were hoping that only the wedding party was going to wear that color, which was included on the invites. He said that having a ring in that shade was no excuse to be breaking the rules. This was said humorously, so my fiancé and I both laughed, and I assured them that I'm most likely wearing something darker and not blue anyway. Tilly then said that Peter was talking around the issue, and that I wouldn't be able to wear my engagement ring at their wedding because it was too close to their shade of blue. She said that she'd already had to make sure a family member wasn't going to wear a necklace with similar gemstones for the same reason. A discussion ensued, as both my partner and I said that it seemed quite strong to be asking me to not wear my ring. Outside of sleeping and bathing, I've barely taken it off since the proposal. Tilly and Peter were insistent that I would be creating drama by wearing it, and if anything, it suggested that I was trying to steal focus away from them and the wedding party. I made it clear that I had zero intention of doing that, but also that the ring was not going to detract from a bride and groom at the end of the aisle. At one point, my partner was even accused of proposing to me as a way of taking more attention from them during their wedding timeline. We got engaged on our 7-year anniversary during the middle of a once-in-a-lifetime holiday, so I am sure it was not just to detract from his friends getting married. We left it at a stalemate, and anticipate that either just me or both of us will be disinvited, which is no issue to me at this stage. I do want to know if I was wrong though, because especially for my fiancé and Peter, they've been friends for over a decade, and it would hurt him if he misses his friend getting married over something so trivial. Was I wrong to refuse? Would you take off your engagement ring?
The chaos doesn't stop. Clash number 3.
I love my son, but I don't like being around him. I love my 11-year-old son, but sometimes I genuinely don't like being around him. I love my 11-year-old son, but sometimes I genuinely don't like being around him. He takes after his dad, my ex, in all the worst ways. He's extremely smart, but he's one of those kids who has to be right about everything. Not just confident, he's completely convinced he knows more than everyone else in every situation. It's exhausting. He gets bullied for it, which is awful. I also understand why. At home, it turns into constant arguments over the smallest things. We've tried to ignore it, but he just keeps pushing until someone responds. Even when we pull up the facts, he'll double down and spew more nonsense with such confidence in his voice. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten into more trouble with his classmates. A few days ago, he sent me a video about chickens attracting rodents to the co-op. We live off-grid in the middle of the woods, so I'm planning to build a co-op soon. I already knew that chickens attract rodents and other pests. I already have preventative measures planned out. The video mentioned not to store feed in the coop and to use proper storage containers. I told him that I was planning to use galvanized steel bins. He reacted and told me I'd end up with $10,000 to $20,000 in damages if I did that. Like, what? I asked him why he thought that, and he doubled down. Rats can chew through anything, even metal. Those bins are so expensive. I looked it up and sent him multiple sources, as well as explained that galvanized steel bins are literally designed for this and are widely used for exactly that reason. Didn't matter. He also has this weird belief that we're poor and likes to brag that his dad makes more than my husband and I combined, which just isn't reality. Not that it even matters, but it's such a strange hill for him to die on. I told him that money wasn't even an issue. Yeah, if you say so. Lol, I just don't get it. I don't know where this constant need to argue, prove everyone wrong, and act like the authority on everything is coming from. I love him. He's a good kid in a lot of ways. But the constant, I know everything and you don't, attitude is driving me up the wall. Biting my tongue is the hardest thing to do, and I find myself wishing that he just didn't talk to me anymore. Have you ever dealt with something like this? How do you handle it when someone you love is exhausting to be around?
Another clash is on the way. Here's number 4.
My boyfriend is suddenly demanding that I stop consuming fictional media at all. My boyfriend is suddenly demanding that I stop consuming fictional media at all. What do I even do? So this is honestly one of the weirder relationship issues I've ever found myself in, and I feel like I'm losing my grip on what's normal here. My boyfriend and I originally bonded over our shared love of nonfiction. We both went through this big history phase when we first met, like deep diving into documentaries and nerding out about succession drama. I loved that about him. I still love that about him. And I never, ever cared that he wasn't as into the high fantasy books and shows I adored. It's just never been a requirement for me that my partner shares every interest. When it came to watching things we both would enjoy, it would be stuff like realistic dramas, period dramas that were on the more accurate side, gritty crime series, documentary series, and so on. We'd usually have a good time with that, but things have really changed over the past couple months. At first it was just small stuff where he'd gently decline when I asked if he wanted to watch some of the more reality-based shows we both used to enjoy. Then he started making these little comments about how fiction is a waste of time, or how fantasy is just escapism for people who don't want to deal with real life. I brushed that off, because everyone's entitled to their tastes. But as you can see from the title, it's become more than that. A couple weeks ago, he started getting visibly annoyed if I put on one of my shows while he was in the room. Not even asking him to watch it with me, just me watching something fictional. And it was the same with books. He literally scoffed when he saw me rereading one of my favorite fantasy novels and said he doesn't understand how an adult can take that seriously. What happened last night is what encouraged me to make this post. I was curling up after work with a blanket and my book, and he told me that he can't respect the fact that I waste hours on make-believe when there's real knowledge out there. He said fiction is rotting my brain and that he doesn't want to date someone who lives in stories instead of the real world. I told him that's ridiculous. I have a stable job, friends, responsibilities. I'm not ignoring reality, I just like my stories. It's relaxing. It's fun. It doesn't hurt anyone. He doubled down and said if I cared about intellectual growth, I'd stop reading and watching fictional media altogether and stick to nonfiction. I honestly thought he was exaggerating at first, but he's dead serious. He said he doesn't want that stuff in his home and that we needed to be on the same wavelength about what's worthy of our time. I told him no, absolutely not, that's controlling and bizarre. He insists it's not controlling, but rather a standard for the kind of life he wants to build. I don't know if this is burnout, depression, some weird identity crisis, something he read online, or something else entirely, but it's making me uncomfortable. And honestly, I feel disrespected and a bit angry. I don't know how to talk to him anymore without him acting like I'm intentionally lowering my intelligence by reading fantasy. What would you do in this situation?
Chaos overload. Let's wrap up this final clash.
I accidentally crashed a confidential meeting on my third day. This was about 2 years ago, and I've told exactly one person. My roommate, who laughed until she cried and then said I have to take this to the grave. It was my third day at a new job. I was still in that phase where every hallway looks identical and you're so scared of seeming incompetent that you just walk confidently everywhere and hope for the best. I had a calendar invite for an onboarding session in conference room B at 2 in the afternoon. I found a room with B on the door, walked in, sat down at the big table, opened my laptop, and started setting up my notes document. There were maybe 8 people already seated. Everyone looked busy and slightly stressed, which seemed completely normal to me because it was my third day and everyone seemed slightly stressed all the time. Nobody questioned why I was there. I assumed this was just how onboarding worked at this company. Then the woman next to me smiled and asked which department I was from. And I, a normal confident person on my third day who did not want to seem lost, said, "Oh, I just joined the marketing team last Monday, still figuring out where everything is." She nodded and turned back to her laptop. I was so proud of myself for sounding casual. 2 minutes later, someone closed the door and a man at the head of the table started talking about third-quarter acquisition strategy and a competitor by name in a way that was absolutely not entry-level onboarding material. I remember thinking, this is pretty advanced for day 3, and just kept taking notes because I genuinely did not want to look unprepared. I was there for approximately 11 minutes before I quietly checked my calendar invite again and noticed the room number had a floor prefix I had completely missed. My onboarding was on the 2nd floor. I was on the 4th floor. The people in this room were almost certainly very senior, and this meeting was almost certainly confidential. I closed my laptop slowly, said sorry, wrong room in the most normal voice I could produce, and walked out. The woman I had introduced myself to watched me leave. The man presenting did not stop talking. I found my actual onboarding. It was fine. 4 people, a slide deck about company values. The notes I took in the wrong room sat in my laptop for a week. When I finally read them properly, 2 things turned out to be genuinely relevant context for a project I got assigned a month later. I used that context. It helped. I did not explain where it came from. I still work there. The woman I introduced myself to became a fairly senior figure in a department that occasionally works with mine. She has never mentioned it. I have never mentioned it. We've had maybe 6 normal professional interactions since then, and every single time I wonder if she remembers. I now triple-check every calendar invite before walking into any room. Would you have said something, or would you have taken it to the grave too?
That was today's chaos. See you at the next clash. Don't just watch the clash, join the corner. Subscribe now.